Welcome to the Dastardly Dingoes podcast, the show where you're not sure if we're wearing pants because we're on Zoom, and it's a show about all things nerdy. We discuss nerd news, movies, TV shows, games, comics, and so much more. I'm Brian.
I'm Jeremy.
And brace yourselves because we're about to get nerdy. I am super excited to announce our guest host. He and I have been good friends for many years now and have connected through our faith and love of comics. He's a pretty good guy, I think. Let's see. He has a THM from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He has an amazing comic book series called The Silence. He has been a chef. He is a husband, a father, and a partridge in a pear tree. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the amazingly talented and overall okay individual, Chad Nuss.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, man. How you doing? How's the pandemic treating you?
Pretty good. I somehow dodged a bullet because I've worked almost full time through the whole thing, through the quarantine and all of that.
Oh, you're one of those essential employees.
Apparently, even though I was working in a non-essential business, so I don't know
how that works.
They got through, yeah. So, but yeah, it's a lot of family time and working, so it's kind of been normal for us. So we've had a good time, actually.
Great, good to hear it, dude. Well, we're excited to have you on the show, and what we do what we've started doing when we have guests is we do a little segment called Get to Know Your Dingoes.
Okay.
And you are now an honorary dingo.
Yes.
I knight you, good sir. So we ask a couple questions before we dig into some nerd news and then get into like an interview with you.
Sure.
Because we want to know all the fun things you got going on. And so first question that I have to inaugurate you as a dingo is what kind of nerd are you? Right? So like there's different kind of nerds. People, I'm a Star Wars nerd. I'm a movie nerd. I'm a comic book geek. I'm a tech head. What are you?
I'm definitely a sci-fi nerd.
All right,
but not the Star Trek version, more like the Star Wars version. But I do like some Star Trek. I like the newer Star Trek. Yeah. And I like the super old Star Trek. I'll just say that. Okay. Like the original Star Trek.
Like the show.
Yeah, I can get down with that. But the newer, like the Patrick Stewart ones, and then the other guy, the bearded guy one, and I forget. I didn't get into all that. But I'm definitely more a Star Wars guy than a Star Trek guy. I will say that.
Yeah, I love that you had to, differentiate and decipher between the two because it's true.
Yeah, they are very different.
Yeah, it's very true. Like Star Wars sci-fi fans are like, those are the fans, and you can always cross over, like you said, but like Star Wars fans tend to be more like adventurous, right? And Star Trek fans are more like science driven.
Which is funny because I would consider myself a little more philosophical than adventurous. And so that's what does appeal to me about Star Trek. I do kind of like darker sci-fi, so like dystopian type stuff, which is not Star Wars. Like Star Wars is more like now, especially nowadays, like, rainbows and unicorn with lightsabers. But I think overall, I just think Star Wars is so much better, just production-wise and all that kind of stuff.
So is it safe to say you're not a sequel fan? Not a fan of...
No, it depends because...
Oh, really?
Yeah, like Star Wars, I liked the original 3 that came out, and I liked the last 3 that came out. I think the ones in the middle were horrid. The like original, like the ones in which Luke Skywalker's a kid and he grows up and all that with Natalie Portman. And
you mean Anakin Skywalker?
Yeah, those were horrible. But the other 6 were amazing.
Okay, so you're not a prequel guy then?
Prequel, yeah, that's a good way.
All right, yeah. You're not a prequel guy. Yeah, I get that. Really, there was a cut made by I think Seth Green of the prequels. It cut all 3 movies down to like 2.5 hours.
Oh, I gotta check that out.
It started. It was on the internet for like a minute.
Yeah,
and then they took it down. But like, I got to see some of it, and it begins with the Darth Maul fight.
Man,
of course.
Yeah, which is like the best way to start a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And that's part of the prequel. Like, I wish. It still blows my mind that they killed him off. Like, he had like 30 minutes of the whole movie, and he's like the best character. Like,
my friend, you need to watch Clone Wars and Rebels.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
and
all
Solo.
I'll say. and Solo.
Oh, I love Solo.
Yeah. So like, the end of Solo where he shows up.
Yeah. For sure.
All of that really, like, you see his character in Clone Wars, you see how he comes back, which is really cool and like really dark.
Nice.
Like Clone Wars, I tried to get into it and I couldn't. First of all, I couldn't really get past the animation style. I didn't really dig it. And then the first season is so kid friendly. I was like, I can't really, like if I was 8, I would love it.
Yes.
And in many ways I am still an 8-year-old as far as my humor and immaturity. But like, I don't know, I couldn't get into it. When you get past the first season, you get to like middle of season 2 and on.
Yeah.
And I don't say this lightly, it's potentially the best Star Wars storytelling
really
across the board. Yes. And Rebels is just as good as Clone Wars. So
yeah, I had the same problem as you, and that's why I never watched Clone Wars, because I started in season 1 and I just couldn't do it. I was like, this is
season
really
1's
tough.
rough.
Yeah. There's a list out there. Apparently, like, part of the problem is the timeline jumps around so much.
Yeah.
And so there's a list out there of how you can watch them in chronological order.
I have it. I have the list. I will send it to you.
Yes, please.
Yes, I have it because that's what I used. Because I was like, it's a lot, and I was trying to gear up to the last movie in the Skywalker saga that came out last year.
Yeah.
And so I binge watched all of Star Wars that was available. I got Disney Plus specifically to do that.
Nice.
And I found a couple lists. There's one for Rebels as well, like all the really important, like overarching story episodes. So so you are a sci-fi nerd in the Star Wars, realm.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, I would throw in like Blade Runner and Ghost in the Shell and that kind of stuff, like darker dystopian sci-fi type stuff too. So that's all I would add to
quick question on that.
Yeah.
Did you see the live action movie Ghost in the Shell?
With what's her name?
Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah. I loved it. I know a lot of people critiqued it, but I was like, it's awesome. It was beautifully done. Yep. The effects were amazing. I love the story. I mean, I thought it was awesome.
Sweet. Yeah, man. I've heard a lot of people that love the anime did not like the live action movie. Yeah. I was like, I actually haven't seen it yet. That's still on my list to watch.
Anime? Oh, really?
Either one. I haven't seen either one.
Oh, are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Yeah, you can watch both.
They're both really good.
Yeah, they're both really good.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad. I think you might be the first person I've talked to that said both of them are good. That is a fan of both,
It's the same when, and I'm sure we'll get into this, when Batman vs. Superman came out. I love that movie, and everyone was like trashing it. So, I mean, I typically like those kind of movies, that other people don't like. But
I'm hard to like. I generally walk out of every movie like that was a good movie, and later on maybe see some like critique of it or something like that. But very rarely do I ever walk out. I'm like, that's a garbage movie. I don't know. I guess the whole process of the theater and going to see movies and things like that.
The experience of a movie is magical.
Yeah.
I think. And it really, I think you have to have a bad movie to really not have a good experience. Or if it's a movie that you thought it was something that it's not. That's happened to me a lot. I with The Witch and Hereditary, those two movies, I went into both of those movies thinking it was one thing, and I did not enjoy it on my first viewing because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and it stuck with me. And I couldn't get either one of those movies out of my head. And I'm like, well, that means it's a good movie, so I need to watch it again. And the second viewing was amazing on both of them.
It did something,
yeah. All right, so Chad, what are your top 5 movies? And I'm also going to tack on, what are your top 5 comics because you create them?
Yeah. So when I was thinking through that, I'm actually the laziest comic book fan of all times because I don't actually read comic books. I usually just like look at them because I like the pictures. So people are always like, talking to me, what characters do you like? What stories do you like? And I'm like, I literally have not read hardly any books. Like I look through them. I have tons of comic books, but I typically just look at them for the pictures. So As far as like movies go, my number one pick as far as comic book movies are the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. I just sit there and think, okay, if I were gonna watch a movie right now and I'm flipping through, all my selections, that'd probably be one of my first picks, one of those three. And then after that, not in any particular order, I kind of like Doctor Strange, which I know is not a lot of people's top 5 or whatever, but I love watching that. I've watched that several times. I like Avengers, obviously Infinity War and Endgame are really good. Mm-hmm. Guardians of the Galaxy, I'll watch that. I think those are hilarious. Thor Ragnarok is probably my favorite Thor movie out of them all, and one of my top, obviously movies. And then other ones like 300. I know that's not your traditional Marvel DC type movie. And then and Batman vs Superman. I really like that one too. But yeah, that was, I know that's more than 5, but that'd be my top movies. As far as comic books, I find myself gravitating towards stuff that's really artistically dynamic. So of course, like the original old school Image stuff, I grew up on that. I love that. Newer stuff like 7 to Eternity is beautiful.
It's so good.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I've not read it, but the pictures are amazing. The artwork is amazing.
I tell Brian all the time that I don't read.
Oh, yeah.
You do, though, and that's what drives me nuts. You do read, because you're always you're always sending me articles and telling me about stuff that you read in your tech world that you love, but you don't read books.
Oh yeah, I'll read like 3,000 words on a new camera, but I just don't read books. I don't know.
It's sad.
Yeah. It's too slow. Like turn it into a visual. Let me see the story happening. I don't want to read about it. You've turned
into the poster child of what people are saying social media has done to our world.
I know, and I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
And who cares? Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, I take the Gary Vaynerchuk approach to that sort of stuff, and like my kids, I mean, with some exceptions, but I'm not gonna make them feel bad for wanting to use technology, because I think the whole world is going in that direction. I think it's almost like learning a second language at this point. Like, why would you not want them to have that advantage?
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. Like, I don't ever want to I would definitely won't make my kids feel like, oh, you shouldn't embrace technology. It's of the devil. But I'm also going to be like, read a book, because the other side of that coin is like, you have all this knowledge here because of technology, and that's helpful and good. But like over here, like, there's just nothing. And I learned this. I didn't learn that. I guess I did learn this as a kid through comics. I hated reading novels and stuff like that when I was a kid, but comic books really captivated me in this way. There's just nothing like sitting there getting lost in a story. With a book in your hands. Like there's really not. And the best of both of those worlds is digital comics. So,
there you go.
You could do that. Have some tablet time, read a comic, snuggle up next to the fire. It's a nice day.
I did at one point get some comics from Comixology.
Yeah.
And look through them that way. Ones that I'm never going to be able to afford to own, like I got the one the first time Wolverine was in a comic, which is an old Hulk.
Wow.
It's an old Hulk comic from the 60s.
Yeah.
And it's like $900, like super rare.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like, it cost me $3 on Comixology. I was able to, so.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I hate to say it because I love physical comics. Like, I love holding them. I make them. So like, I love real comics that you hold, but there's something about Comixology's format that really is nice, because you don't have to worry about cheating and looking ahead when you turn the page or anything like that. It's literally a panel by panel swipe. And especially like older comics, they just kind of had to format it well and do their best. But the new comics, like, people are making pages specifically designed to swipe through panels and to swipe through, different portions of the page. So it really brings, like, that dynamic brings a whole new experience to the comic book reader that I think you've never had before. So there's something to digital comics that I really do enjoy.
That's actually was my inspiration for the animations that I did in your video with the different panels, like going from one place to the next and having that motion blur that naturally happens when you're swiping on a tablet, but they're in a video and you're just kind of looking at it and it's moving from place to place.
Yeah.
I just think that it's like a different level of engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It really is. And one that I think is just going to get better in the future. I'm excited to see what direction comics take in like a virtual reality type setting. I think that's probably going to be next. Yeah. Like essentially, like if you look at a comic as like a building, right? And the first page is like you walk through the door and you're like through the VR goggles, you're actually in the panel and you can walk around. They're all 3D, and I think that'd be pretty cool.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And so each room in that building is a different page type thing. So yeah, that's a cool idea. I think that's probably the future. And that'll be fun. But for me, it's always just the nostalgia, there's just nothing like having the book in your hands too.
Yeah.
Chad, do you have anything to add to that, my friend?
No. I need to go get a burger, I think, right now.
Oh man. Well, okay, so we're gonna move into the real reason why we're all here today, right? Getting to know the Nuss.
Yes.
So Chad, tell us your story, man. First, like, how'd you get into comics?
I got into comics. My one of my uncles, Uncle James, bought me a small stack of comics when I was like really young, and I still remember to this day. It was like an old G.I. Joe. There was a couple Indiana Jones and a couple other ones, and I just picked those up, started reading them, just really was fascinated by this kind of art form. And then it was several years later, I was in a Kmart with my mom, and they had this book right here, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Oh my gosh, you have it.
I do have it.
This is awesome.
Unfortunately, this is not the original one that my mom bought me. I think my brother has that one, and I wish I had it because it has all these, like, I drew in it, I wrote in it, I studied this book like you would not believe it. I sat at my kitchen table for hours reading through this book, drawing. This is how I learned. I mean, besides practice and that kind of thing, but that book was really what helped me learn how to draw comics. And so I think those were the main things. And then when Image Comics came out, I was in late middle school, early high school, and just devoured those. And at that point, I was like, this is it. I mean, the way they drew, it was so different from what had come before. And it just blew my mind that you could do that with the human body, the way they drew it. It just was really, fascinating. And so that's how I got started. And so I just started drawing mainly like, it's trying to figure out how to draw humans, because humans are really hard to draw. If you've never drawn before, or if you tried to draw, you can draw a house, you can draw a car. Those seem to be pretty easy because they're basic shapes. But to try and get a human to look like a human, or a face or hands or those kind of things are really challenging. And so that's what I mainly focused on, was how do I draw people. And so that's what I started doing. So
cool, man. Yeah, well, go ahead, Jeremy.
There's something called the Uncanny Valley. Have you heard about that before?
No.
So it's like the idea of, especially with humans, this is true in like visual effects, especially. So you think about the times where there's something just like not quite right about it, and it looks like way off and like super fake. So the Uncanny Valley basically is like, there's a point at which the closer you get to real, the more off we perceive it. Like our brain, our instinctual brain is like, I don't like that. There's something weird about that. Even if we can't like pinpoint it, until you get to that like plateau of like, okay, now this looks like a human. But there's this like place where you have to put in like so much more effort, especially in visual effects. That's why like you think about this, we're talking about Justice League, right? So Superman, his mustache, it had to be digitally removed, and it looks so fake, right?
Yeah.
Because all of the little like muscles in your upper lip and how that moves in relation to your lower lip and how you naturally speak and things like that, like, you can put in 150,000 hours into making that look real just for that one spot, or you pay some like crew not involved with the movie, you kind of like farm out different projects and you say, okay, I just need his mustache gone, and that's what we got. We got people that didn't like put in the effort to make it look real.
And I've always said too that when you draw, a lot of times the value of detail and making, the more detail you put in it, even though it's a fantasy or it's not real, the detail really helps it feel real. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a big the reason why I say that is because with that particular example of them taking out the mustache, it was so poorly done because it, as you were saying, like it didn't look real. Like they missed all the little details that go into what happens with your face when you talk and those kind of things, that it just stood out. And I think that's the same thing when you draw. Like you have to be thinking about how do these clothes fold around an arm, and how does the light hit this particular thing, and how do these leaves really look on a tree? And if you don't get that right, it's like you said, it's just off, and you're trying to figure out why is that? And your eye tends to be attracted to what is wrong. And I've noticed that in my drawings too. For me, it's always a proportion thing. If something's too big or too small, it all of a sudden it just pops out at me, and then I adjust it, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's a lot better. So, yeah, exactly what you're saying. I've never heard that put that way, so that was really helpful. Yeah, it was good. So,
yeah, I can't remember some guy in Japan, but it's just like it's something that he came up with, and like you said, articulating it kind of helps. Like, oh, okay, I see what's going on now.
So what speaking about creating, what inspired you, Chad, to create The Silence, which is your comic? You've done issue 1 so far, working on issue 2 right now. So what inspired you to create it, and what's it all about?
Originally I had a group called the Silent Knights with a K, Knights with a K, and I came up with that group in middle school, high school period of my life. And I still have some of those drawings. I should post those at some point because they're really bad. But I can't even remember what the story was behind them. I remember this one character I had was called Rail Run, and he could glide on like a train track or like a subway rail using electricity, and he had gotten to that point because he got struck by lightning. I mean, it was like the most typical like superhero type story.
Did he have a secret identity that like Clark Kent?
That kind of stuff. So
first and last name start at the same letter.
So it went from that to what I have now called The Silence, and I think a lot of the influence on that was obviously things that happened in my own life. And so in college, my dad passed away, and that forced me to start thinking about life in a much deeper way, because I'd never really confronted death or the meaning of life or anything like that. And so I got much more serious at that point and more philosophical. And the comic book ideas took that turn as well. And so it went from the Silent Knights, which is this goofy group of comic book characters to the silence, which is much more of a philosophical story about the meaning of life and what's wrong with the world and what's the solution and those kind of things. Just happens to use a comic book medium to express that story. So that's kind of how that evolved. As far as what it's about, it's like I said, the silence is one of those epic stories. Like it's one of those big picture stories where what I'm trying to do is really talk about the meaning of life, which I know sounds like a pretty high order. But the silence as a whole is a large story composed of these 4 main characters, and they're in this universe called the Prolegomena system. I don't know how detailed you want me to get. I won't get too far.
Oh, dude, just lay it on us, man.
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's dive deep. Jump into the deep end here, buddy.
All right. So the Prolegomena is a word that's used in philosophy for basically first things. It's the first thing you do before you dive into philosophy. It's like you're trying to figure out your foundational beliefs or the framework for how you think of life. And so everyone has a prolegomena. So when you think about any issue in life, you already have a framework or worldview, which you're going to approach that. And so the reason why I use that is because not only is it a cool sounding word to name a galaxy or a universe around, but it also has that double layer of meaning that they're going into this world and trying to find answers. And in the bigger picture of it, it's a comparison between general revelation or general theology and special revelation. Or in other words, they're going through this universe trying to find answers without hearing from God. And they get to a point, or a creator, or however you want to say it, and they get to a point where it's just empty. They keep coming up to shut doors and empty answers, and they can't find it. And then there's a prophecy that they hear about this character called the Face, and then they're trying to find, who this person is, and that leads them through this journey. And then you follow that search on the way. And so in the Prolegomena system, there's 12 planets. Each planet is named after one of the tribes of Israel in the Old Testament, but they also represent a different worldview. And so what I'm trying to do with the story is I'm going to interact with that worldview in a way to show through story why that worldview doesn't work and why you need special revelation to give you answers to the meaning of life. So for a quick example, the story starts out on Issachar, which is one of the tribes of Israel, and the worldview represents is utopia or dystopia. And so they're in a situation where the society believes that death is gone, that they have answered that question of life, why do we die? But then you find out, and this is what launches the whole thing, is that people are dying, they're just covering it up, which is what a basic dystopia does. And so when they uncover that, then they're forced to find out what we've lived under this lie for so long, what's going on here. And then they're introduced to the fact that there are other people in the universe because there's a spacecraft crash lands on their planet. And so then they go out into the universe. So then the next one they go to is the planet Dan. And Dan represents dualism, which is the basic thought that there's body and spirit, and they're two separate things. And that also represents legalism and righteousness and self-righteousness and that kind of thing. So what I'm doing now is, as I'm writing the story for Issachar, I'm starting to do some reading and research on dualism and trying to find out as a philosophy, what are its good points, what are its bad points, where are the holes, why doesn't it work, what are some historical examples of that. So that's what I do behind the scenes. So a lot of research, trying to figure out or trying to review these different philosophies and kind of unpack them in the story. So there's more to it than that, but that's a basic overview of what's going on with the story.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, I feel like we're all smarter now because of you. So thank you for that. No joke. Like whoever's watching, listening, if you haven't checked out The Silence, you need to. Like, I read the first issue, and Chad's a lot smarter than me. So legit, by the end of the first issue, the first read, I was like, I'm confused. So I went back, but it's not like a bad confused. It's like what did I just read? My brain's melting. Like, It's just so steeped in intelligent storytelling. And I've read the first issue like 5 times, and I find something new every single time. Like it is such a great experience. And just talking about, the philosophy and divine revelation and things like that. So obviously you are a Christian. What's it like to be a Christian in the comic book industry? What do you feel like, there are some things that you have to overcome, or obstacles that you have, maybe some stereotypes that people have, that you've experienced, and also, like, in because this series is very much sharing your faith through storytelling. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I was thinking about that question before, and I've thought about that kind of a lot, especially when you're coming from a Christian perspective. A lot of people kind of wrestle with, boundaries or doors or difficulties of being a Christian, and maybe some pushback that you would get. But really, I think it just depends on your expectations, right? So, like, if you're going into comic books thinking, I want to make $1 million and be super famous and be at conventions and sign autographs and all that kind of stuff, like, as a Christian, I'm not saying that can't happen, because you have someone like Jason Fabok, for example, is a very strong Christian. So that can happen, but the reality of that happening is very small. Like, it's like trying to be a professional athlete or trying to be a famous actor. Like, only 0.1% of 0.1% get to that level.
Yeah.
So, like, I could show you on my phone thousands of people on Facebook that are really good comic book artists that you'll never hear about, like, on that level. And it's the same, it's the same in athletics, like I was saying, actors and all that kind of thing. So I think if you set yourself up for that, you're gonna hit a lot of walls, because it tends to be a little bit more on a liberal side of things. It tends to be a little bit more like anti-religion, anti-Christian, that kind of thing. And I think some of what feeds that is Christians tend to be idiots. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but Christians tend to not have tact. Like, they tend to just want to throw their faith in someone's face and think that they're being faithful for doing that, and think that any pushback they're getting is persecution, when really you could have eliminated all of that if you just had a bit of tact and compassion. Yeah. And so, I think of, people like Tolkien and Lewis and Dostoevsky, who were amazing Christians that people of all backgrounds read and enjoy. And I think you can take that same approach with comic books, that you can create something that's so intriguing. It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or not. I mean, at the end of the day, it does, but in the sense that it doesn't matter what you're coming from. If you do something of high quality that's made with beauty and attention to detail and layers of meaning that reflects the complexity of life, I think anyone can really identify with that and see why that's awesome and amazing. And the whole thing about I'm a Christian, you're not a Christian, kind of gets taken off the table, because that conversation can tend to be confrontational, because you're trying to prove each other wrong.
Yeah.
When you're telling the gospel through story, the advantage there is that someone can enter into that story, and all the walls that they put up because they know some Christian friend who was a jerk to them get torn down, or they see some guy on the corner yelling at them, some preacher who through good intentions just left a bad taste in their mouth. It tears all of that down, so they can actually think through the story and why is it being told in that way. And, I think of a C.S. Lewis or a Tolkien, like I mentioned. You watch Lord of the Rings, or you watch, or you read Mere Christianity, or watch, what's the stinking trilogy that he did?
Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah. You watch all those, and yeah, there's some obvious Christian overtones to it, but it's done in such a way that you're like, wow, that makes sense. Like, yeah, that interacts with my experience of life. That idea of someone that's wrong, and then someone taking their place and dying for them, like the lion does, or the defeat of evil by the faithfulness of the good and the what the ring represents. You know, all those kind of things are themes that we can all identify with, regardless of your background. So I think the only kind of pushback that you get sometimes is stuff that you create on yourself. You know, it's like, if I'm gonna have a booth at a convention and put a big cross on my thing and just say, hey, do you want to become a Christian? Come here and sign this thing, and here, buy my comic book. Well, obviously not a whole lot of people are gonna really, you know, like that. But instead, if you say, here's a book that I've written and drawn that deals with the complexity of life and offers a different perspective that you may not have considered, consider these characters and how they interact with that universe, and then consider your own life. I think that's appealing. And I think anyone can really interact with that regardless of your background. So,
yeah, I think it really, you know, it allows people to view truths of Christianity and themes of Christianity, and that, you know, we as Christians, you know, all three of us are, you know, we as Christians understand, and we've, you know, we've grown up in church, or you know, we've studied the Bible extensively. It gives people that haven't done those things and have really bad, you know, have had bad experience with Christians who are idiots. I love that's so nuanced, by the way. But it's true, you know, like I can tell you so many of my friends, like so many of my friends that have rejected Christianity, a lot of it comes back to negative experiences that they've had with Christians, and people who, like you said, good intentions, just it didn't end well, and it, you know, that it was just a really bad experience that they had. And I think telling stories like Lord of the Rings, like the Chronicles of Narnia, it opens people up to experience the Christian message through story, which we're all storytelling, you know, bound creatures. You know, whether you think of things in you know, math related ways or not, you're still, at the end of the day, you know, you tell somebody your problems, you tell somebody what happened to you. That you are in some way telling a story, and we're all wrapped up in a story. And so it allows us to kind of, you know, step away from, you know, what a lot of people would view as religious laws and religion, you know, like rules that we have to live by, and experience what the message of Christianity actually is through story, which we're all a lot more, you know, able to comprehend and able to accept a lot easier, I think, than somebody standing on the street corner screaming at you.
And I mean, if you look at everyone, like you said so well, everyone is living in a story. Like, your life is a story. In other words, all the major parts of a story are in your life. You were born, you have a conflict, which is death, that you need to resolve. And most people don't realize they're spending their entire life trying to resolve that conflict, because they're thinking, they may not think specifically, well, I'm going to die someday, so I've got to figure out what to do with my life, kind of thing. But everyone gets to a point where you realize that you're immortal. At some point, your life is going to be over, and you've got to figure out, what was the point of what I did here, and why am I doing this? And you can either take the kind of, well, I'll just live life however I want. That person is much trying to solve that problem as the other person who's super religious and legalistic. They're both trying to solve the problem of death. And I think that's the power of story. It taps into the human experience that everyone is a part of. And I think a lot of people are hesitant with story because, or from a Christian, particular conservative Christian perspective, are hesitant with story because it can seem to get so loose, and we're so used to, like, we believe in propositional truth. This is right, this is wrong, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we don't like gray areas.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is, life doesn't work that way. Like, life is not so black and white, and there are shades of meaning, and there are shades of right and wrong, and that kind of thing. And certainly there are, I want to be clear, there are certainly things that are definitely right and definitely wrong, but life doesn't work that easily. And I think most people understand that complexity, and I think you can really tap into that with a story.
I absolutely agree. And speaking of everyone having a story, You've had a little bit of a hiatus from creating the comic, and you have ventured into becoming a chef over the last couple of years. So tell us kind of what that journey was like, what that story is, if you will.
Yeah. So just real quick, I shared a video about this on Facebook, but basically there were three major events that happened in my life that just got me to the point of frustration and put me into a real dark area of my life. And so the first one was I just really kept seeing, like, I was in ministry for a while. As you said, I went to Southern, got a couple of theology degrees, really saw my life going in that direction. I didn't know specifically what. I didn't know if it was to be a pastor or whatever. But we had started a house church. We had done Bible studies. We had done service in the church. And I just got to this point where it seemed like door after door after door just kept continually closing. And I got to that point where I'm like, I have put everything I know to put into this thing. Like, there was a point at which my wife and I were both working like 2 or 3 jobs. We had 2 or 3 kids at that point. We were trying to run a Bible study in a house church. We were going on mission trips. We were doing like 50 million things. And you just get burned out when you're going that fast for that long. Yeah. And then when you're told certain things or not allowed to do, things that you think were what you should be doing, you just get to the end of it. You're like, well, why am I expending myself just to be told no all the time? And so that may not have been the right reaction, but that's what the reaction was at that point in my life. I just got exhausted. So then from there, I started getting back into art, and I was like, I've got this gift that God has given me to draw and create. So I'm going to get back into the comic book world and really just put out this book. And so I did that. Things were going really well. And we had an awesome Kickstarter, got the first issue published. And then I was like, well, I guess the next step is to take it to the next level, go talk to an editor, see if I can get some traction there. And so I had sent my stuff to people. I had talked to editors. I had tried to get my book in the hands of like famous artists. I had done everything to do. I had made connections with people. And so we went to C2E2 hoping to get just a conversation with an editor. That's really what I wanted. I just wanted some feedback and some advice. And if you go to C2E2, one of the things they do is portfolio reviews. And in order to do that, you have to have a kind of a mini sample. You turn it in, and then out of all that they'll pick 10 people to talk to. And I felt like I had a strong portfolio, so I turned that in. I showed up and didn't get a hearing, and went to all the other major publishers. No one was willing to talk to me. And then I had a guy who was doing it. He was an independent publisher. And I just happened to like go to his stand. He was asking me what I was doing. And I said, yeah, I'm trying to get a portfolio review. And I was like, you want to do one? I mean, you're a publisher, so let's take a look at it. And he just tore my stuff up. Like, it was really harsh. And like I said in the video, like kind of unfair, just the way he treated it. And so just that was at the very tail end of that trip. And so I just walked away completely defeated and exhausted. And like I say, that may have not been the right answer or the right reaction, because I just self-published my own book, had an amazing Kickstarter, had a pretty huge fan following. Like, everything seemed to be going well, but it just, after having felt defeat in one area, now feeling defeat in a second area, it just was like 2 hits. And then I took a GM position, or a general manager of a restaurant, and I thought that was a good idea because it came right after that. I was like, okay, well, if that's not going to be my career, if I'm not going into ministry, I can't really do this as a career as an artist. Well, I guess I'll do this, and that'll be awesome, and I can still do what I want on the side. But being a general manager of the restaurant was the worst year of my life. I mean, it took away everything. Like, it took away my family time, took away my art time, took away ministry, everything, and I was just consumed.
It took you away from me as well. I was very sad.
Exactly, yes, from all my friends and family and everything. And at the end of that year, I was completely exhausted, and so I resigned. And at that point, I was done. And I literally was like, I'm leaving everyone alone. I got off social media. I went through a very dark time. I don't think I was like 100% depressed, but my wife firmly believes I went through PTSD. Like every time my phone went off, I'd get anxious because I was constantly getting phone calls from my boss when I was a GM.
Yeah.
I just didn't do well for that year, and just really questioned, like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? Everything I've tried to do has not worked. And you just get to that point of a midlife crisis because, I'm in my mid 40s. To start over after having spent 20 years doing all these 3 different things is like, it's exhausting to think about. Yeah. To start something new. And so I remember during that time, I was like, the one thing I did love to do was to cook. And so I thought, well, if I'm not going to be a GM, I'm going to go get a job in a kitchen, just cook, learn how to do that. And that'll be my life and my career. And I'll just go for that. And so that's what I did. I left being a GM, went to a fine dining restaurant, and just got involved in the kitchen there and loved it because it was a creative outlet and it was a new thing that I could learn. But I still had this longing for the drawing. It was still in the back of my mind, and it was still there, and it would crop up every once in a while. And so a little while after that time, I had even started posting a few things on Facebook, and I had put out that I was going to do like commission drawings and stuff like that. And then I did some, and I was like, I just got burnt out again. So I put it away. And so I was done. And then it wasn't until recently that I realized, like, the one thing I'm really good at, the one thing I love, the one thing I'm the happiest doing is the silence. Because it's a way I can express my faith, and it's a way that I can express my gifts. And I love to do it. And I don't love sitting on my couch playing video games for 8 hours at a time and just eating whatever I want, being lazy and not interacting with people. Like, that's fun at first, but then that gets old too. And so I just realized that, I got to the end of that, and I was like, I need to contribute to the world, and I need to do what the gifts that He has given me. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to rearrange my life so I can get that done. So by the time this comes out, I will no longer be a chef because I now have an opportunity to stay home and work with my kids. I have 2 kids that are autistic. And so we've worked it out with our finances where I can do that. I'll probably pick up like a small part-time job or something on the side. And so I'm going to stay home with my kids, work with them, and draw the silence. So
that sounds like an awesome situation, dude.
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, 2 things. Where can we? Well, first of all, what's coming next, right? So you said you're working on issue 2. So what can we expect? I know you recently released a Facebook video about what we're expecting this fall. So get into a little bit of that, and then kind of when to expect, what to expect from you in the next 6 months to a year, and moving forward. And then also, where can we find your stuff? Where can we buy issue 1, so on and so forth?
Sure. I think just one quick addition I would say is that I got to a point where I realized that getting into a company is not really that important. What's more important is putting my stuff out. So that's the beauty of social media, is that you can get past all the gatekeepers, and you can just put out your own stuff, build your own audience, and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm really
as well.
And Kickstarter, exactly. Yeah. And so that's what I'm really excited about. And so what's coming up is in the fall, I'm going to republish or reissue number 1 as a hardcover. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I want all of them to be hardcovers, because the way I work and the length of time it takes, I'll probably put out about a book a year. And so instead of just doing a floppy for people to buy, I want them to buy something that's substantial and worth the investment. So I felt like a hardcover would really do that for me. Mm-hmm. So in the fall, issue 1 will come out as a hardcover, and the first half will be the original story. And then the second half will be sketches and ideas and concepts that I use to create that, and also for future issues. Cool. And then in the spring, issue number 2 will come out once again as a hardcover. Same thing. First half will be the story. Second half will be the concept sketches, poster art, that kind of thing. And then the plan is to publish 1 every year for the next 40 years. Because there will be, I call the silence a space symphony.
Yeah.
And in the symphony, there are 4 major movements. And so each movement will have 10 volumes, and there's 4 movements. So that's 40 volumes. So I realized that could be unrealistic. I totally get it. I already had one person kind of push back, like, you've only made 1 book and you're sitting here saying you're going to do books for the rest of your life. And I was like, yeah, okay, I understand. But at the same time, at some point I might be able to put out 2 or 3 in a year.
Yeah.
And so for now, the goal, I think that's realistic, is to do 1 a year, and to do a 60-page hardcover book. I think it's something that people would be willing to pay a little bit more money for and to invest in. So then I can take that money and invest in future books. And that's kind of the plan.
With Memoirs of an Angel, like it's similar in I mean, yours is a much broader goal, with 10 volumes, or 40 volumes. But like with Memoirs, like, it's going to be 4 books with 3 volumes apiece. So, if I were to put out 1 a year, which so far that's what I've done, it's going to take, I'll be like in my 60s, so yeah. Thankfully, I've been able to kind of compromise a little bit and squish some things together, and going to make an announcement soon that's going to shorten that time frame. But, it's one of those things where you don't want to give up the story that you have. Yeah. That every piece, like in a symphony, every piece is important, and every piece, it's a stepping stone to the next level. Yeah. And if you remove that, and if you compromise too much, you'll lose the message of the story, and you'll lose crucial pieces. So, I think that vision is great. I think it's really unique to do the hardback deal, and eventually, who knows, man, 5-10 years down the road, you could get picked up by a publisher. It could, you could be able to pump out, quarterly book or a monthly book, something like that with this. And yeah, never compromise I'm of the mind of never compromise the vision of the story that you have, because it may not be marketable enough. Yeah. Like that, that stuff comes and goes. Yeah. And at the end of the day, you need to be doing what you think, justifies the story. Yeah. And what's best for the storytelling process.
That was the beauty of going through that kind of like dark period, is that for me personally, I just got to a point where I stopped caring in a bad way, but the good way was I stopped caring about success, like in the sense that, I'm going to be famous and it's going to be out there and all that. I don't care about that anymore. Like really, I'm more concerned about getting the story out. If you like it, awesome. If you don't, that's fine too. Yeah. And, that's the beauty of where we're at right now, is you can publish your own book and, just go do your own thing. Who cares? It's like someone had put on Facebook, I mentioned that they had some pushback, like, why would you devote yourself to one story? Like, why wouldn't you want to do other stories? Or, and I'm like, you don't understand. Like, if I wanted to do a steampunk issue, I could totally do it, because they could go to a different planet and that could be a steampunk planet. Or they could go to another planet and it could be a medieval planet. It doesn't, it's like the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. And I think that's the best situation, rather than.
Neil Gaiman said something similar when he was doing his Sandman run. He's like, he literally had a character who is Dream, who can do whatever, whenever, because he's timeless. Yeah. He moves in people's dreams, so he can be in modern day time and someone's having a dream of ancient times. Yeah. And you can cross those timelines. You can tell a story that took place in the past. It's just, and it's the same with that, with the silence. Different planets could be completely different, whatever you want the setting to be. And whatever you want these characters to experience, you can explore that, and you can take your time to do it, because we live in the age where, hey, if you can get the following, first of all, you could just do a web comic if you wanted to, which, might cost you a domain, a year. But other than that, that's it.
Yeah.
And so, there's nothing really holding creators back anymore.
Yeah.
If your goal is truly to just tell a story, and your goal isn't to get famous or isn't the numbers and all that stuff, which I would argue, if that is your goal, you're not in it for the right reasons.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you don't need, there are no gatekeepers anymore with Kickstarter, with social media, with, being able to own your own domain and put out whatever you want. The sky's the limit.
Yeah.
And if you've got a vision, don't compromise, just go do it. And eventually maybe somebody will catch it and do something with it that's big and extravagant, and maybe not. But at the end of the day, that's not why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the big picture too, it could be one of those things that you devote your entire life to, you die and pass on, and someone 100 years down the road finds, oh man, there's 40 volumes. Like, so who did this? Like, we need to really do something with this, so that you have to think more of like long-term legacy rather than just short-term popularity or whatever, So.
Yeah. One time I was talking to my wife about just that, it was just where we were at with the comic at the time. And she said something to me that really has stuck, and I've shared with other people, and I remind myself all the time, is you're not always creating for the reader right now. You're creating for the reader who will pick up your stuff in 10 years.
Yeah.
And they're who you're creating for. And you always have to keep that in your mind, because my goodness, was it Edgar Allan Poe was a poor man most of his life.
Yeah.
Didn't see half of his stuff published in any kind of extravagant way.
Yeah.
And now I have a Barnes and Noble collector's edition of all of his created works in a leather bound, bookshelf pretty form.
Yeah.
And that man never saw this happen. That man, Vincent van Gogh, similarly,
I would think that same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he never got to see the popularity of his paintings. He never got to see people appreciate them.
Yeah.
And now he's gone down as a legend.
Yeah.
And he never got to see that. And I think that vision that you just described of legacy, that's the important part for a creator. I think that's what you need to have in the back of or really in the front of your mind all the time is, okay, I'm not creating for, on some level you are creating for the people who are currently reading, but you're also always creating for that person who will find your work down the road, who knows how long down the road.
Yeah.
And they're just as important as the current reader now.
Yeah. And if you're creating for the people today, which you are, but if you get wrapped up in how many likes you get or how much response you get or how many people invest in your Kickstarter or how many people buy the copies, like, you will get disillusioned very quickly and dissatisfied and frustrated because you're not created for that. Like, you're created to do something that's more everlasting than just something that, the immediate person is going to enjoy. So I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's so many examples of artists and creators that didn't see that success during their lifetime. And I think part of the reason why, and I could be totally wrong, but I think some of the reason why God does that is to protect that person from the pride and arrogance that can come from success.
Yeah.
And to get you to enjoy the creative process as an act of worship rather than as a consumer activity that you're doing just to build yourself up, And so that's why I'm very thankful for the dark period in my life, and I'm thankful for struggle, because that's what it does to you. It breaks you down and reminds you what the real purpose of your life is. It's not about you. It's about finding your happiness and satisfaction in God and serving Him, So anyway.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback off what you just said, it's to put it in a less impressive way, is essentially the vision of doing something outside of yourself for someone else, and that who will reap benefits that you'll never see.
Yeah.
It's a very selfless way to look at it versus it's all about me. It's all about my satisfaction of doing it and reaping that reward here and now.
Yeah.
Versus taking a selfless, view and thinking ahead to someone else who will enjoy this and reap those benefits that you won't get. Yeah. And I think that's satisfying to know that, to imagine someone down the road who will see what you've created and because you weren't wrapped up in the pridefulness of it all, and were able to just enjoy the creative process, and like you said, using it as almost a tool of worship, that you can put, I think you can put a lot more heart and soul into it. And I think that's why things like Lord of the Rings, things like Chronicles of Narnia have stuck around so long.
Yeah.
Because both of them were both of those things were acts of worship.
Yeah.
One was more allegorical than the other one, but that wasn't the point. It was all about creating something that told us who we are.
Yeah.
And what journey we're on.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And ultimately for them and for you and I, as well, as Christian creators, it's to point people to God and where you fit in the story he's telling as well.
Yeah.
And to share that with others and to point people to him.
Absolutely.
So, all right, man. Well, we're here at the end of our time. So, tell us where we can find you and how we can get your books, or, well, you said, so do you not have like an online store or anything right now?
No, you can still get the first issue at Comic Book World here in Louisville. You could send me a message and I'll send you one. I think the best way to support me right now is just through Facebook and Instagram. Okay. Just because that's where I put all my stuff out, is through those two mediums. So just follow me on that. I post stuff. I'm trying to post stuff daily. I'm taking the Gary Vaynerchuk approach, which was mentioned earlier, of just documenting what I'm doing. I think a lot of people really love that approach, and so that's what I'm trying to do. But anyways, that's the main thing, is through social media. And then I might do a pre-order for the first book, because I've already had a request for that. Then that way I'll kind of get an idea how many I need to make, how many copies I need to make. So yeah. But if you follow me on Facebook, you'll find out how to do all that stuff. So follow me on Facebook. That's all right.
Cool, man. Really quick, are you thinking of doing another Kickstarter, or is it going to be okay?
The republish for issue 1, I will just fund myself because it's affordable to do. But the Kickstarter for the second issue will be in the spring, probably, or the fall, or the spring or the early summer to 2021. Gotcha. Unless I get the book done before that, but that's kind of the plan right now. So,
Chad, thank you for not only being on the show, but just blessing us with your amazing intelligence and philosophical wordage, sir. I think we are, as you can tell, it really stuck with me. Good words, good smart words are great.
Well, no, thank you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm just very blessed to have you guys as friends, and thank you all for your support and everything you all are doing. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure thing, man. We'll definitely try to have you back on the show in the future, especially when things start coming out again.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.